Let's do this. Turn left. Keep right, and then turn right.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jonathan Tapp with the same truck, Peterbilt 359, and the
Turn
same
right.
transmission and engine. Uh, I stopped here in New Mexico, New Mexico, and we're going to start with Iowa, and
Get ready to turn right.
followed by Texas.
Turn right.
By the new state for steam, which is Illinois. So let's go for a ride.
You have arrived at your destination. Your route guidance is now finished. Time to hit the road. Okay, here we go. Get ready to turn left. Turn left. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left.
This programming is sponsored by Baylor College of Medicine. With over 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
They have great defensive line coaches, and offense, they're not as good. But the defense is going to have to dominate. Defense is going to have to score some touchdowns. One of my complaints, Pittsburgh in the playoffs, defense scores 2 touchdowns. So common sense tells you go to New England for the divisional round. The weather's pretty bad. Not awful, but it's bad. So all you want to do is don't turn it over. Let the defense dominate. Let the defense get after Drake May. Maybe they score a couple more touchdowns. If you have to hand it off 3 times and punt, do it because the defense is great, and the defense dominated Drake May. But Stroud was so bad early, and it's the play call. And his interceptions and pick six were just awful. He lost his confidence. I would have pulled him and put in Davis Mills at halftime. But Nico, being a former player, I think sometimes he feels decisions through his mindset as a great player like he was. And maybe that'll help Stroud this year that he didn't get pulled. But, man, what an embarrassing situation for him. And I think the coaching, the offensive coaching needs to be better, and I think it will be better.
Well, Ernie, I can't believe you asked him about what they needed to win and not ask him about what movie he was going to be in next. John McClane, you give us a little rundown of your acting career, things that people might be familiar with, and what are you going to audition for next?
Let's see. I was in
Caution,
Spring
please mind
Breakers.
speed limit.
Invincible, Secretariat, a thing called Make It Rain. My best part was a movie I love called Cook County, which is on Amazon. And Spring
straight
Breakers
on.
was my last one with James Franco and Selena Gomez and Vanessa Hudgens. I was a judge. I had 2 other offers for parts when
Keep
I was
left,
laid up with a shoulder
and then turn left.
replacement. One guy said, "Can you be here tomorrow? We need a judge." I said, "Boy, unless I can
Turn
do it
left.
with Zoom, I can't do it." And it was the most famous soap opera ever. It's the only one I've ever heard of, and I couldn't do it, and I had to turn down another one. And we did a remake. I was doing a remake of Footloose, and it was going to be with Dennis Quaid from Houston, who had been in The Rookie with me. And but the Texans played in Washington, and it the first set was 6 a.m. on Monday morning. I couldn't get away out of Washington on Sunday to get there. And so they took somebody else, which is great because the movie was awful.
So is this something you actively pursue, or is it just when opportunities
No,
drop
I
in
need
your
a
lap?
better agent. The producers,
Don't we all?
one of the producers who I met was a young guy, Mark Ciardi and Gordon Gray. They did The Rookie. And I knew the director, John Lee Hancock from Baylor. And I told them,
Get ready to
why do
turn
y'all
right.
take extras in scenes when you can have media helping
Turn
you
right.
promote it? And they're like, well, we never thought about that. I said, well, we're in the Rangers ballpark where Jim Moore's making his first appearance from San Angelo, and all of his family's there, and his friends, and his students. And I said,
Get
let me
ready
bring
to
media
turn
people
left.
to that press box scene. And I invited about 40. They got
Turn
all
left.
kind of publicity, and they're, wow, we're going to put you in some more movies. So in The Longest Yard remake, I'm in a press box scene with Adam Schefter, Jay Glazer, the late Brian Burwell, Sam Farmer, Peter King, and we had a blast. They treated us like royalty, and everybody promoted it. And then those
Go
producers
straight
told
on.
me, if you'd lose some weight, you could get in some more of our movies. Well, obviously, I'm not their type. I said, if you need me in any nude
Turn
scenes,
right.
I need a workout coach in 2 years to prepare.
Well, I guess I should ask my question differently. If you were given the keys to the kingdom, how would you win an Oscar? But I guess we'll have to wait to get that
Well, I
answer.
was nominated for sporting.
That category.
You've been
ready
great
to turn
supporting
left.
this conversation. John McClane, you've covered the NFL in Houston for 50 years. You're a member of the
Turn
Pro Football Hall of Fame and the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. Thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Guys, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And that wraps up this edition of the Best of Hello Houston. I'm Jim Kovacic, the executive producer of the show. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William
Keep
Menivong,
right,
Laura Walker,
and then
Jed
turn
Altide, Todd Holslander, Jayla Rhodes, Mark DeClaudio,
Turn
Tom
right.
Carter, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
HPM Plus brings you the latest news and information from around the world and across the street. Trusted journalists delivering facts, fairness, and perspective. Keeping you connected by keeping you informed. PBS NewsHour, Frontline, and documentaries that provide a voice to the voiceless. Stream live, engage on demand, and enjoy past seasons through PBS Passport. Search HPM Plus on your smart and connected TVs and stay informed.
Support comes from Common Spirit, the new home of St. Luke's Health in Greater Houston, where the nation's first successful heart transplant was performed in 1968. St. Luke's Health is becoming
straight
Common
on.
Spirit. More at stlukeshealth.org.
Your NPR station, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
It's the Splendid Table from APM, American Public Media. I'm Francis. If you are old enough to remember when McDonald's had those signs that said, over 1 billion served, and then watched it eventually go to over 2 billion served, well, here's a stat that might blow your mind.
In 2022, Americans consume over 5 billion servings of instant ramen, which is kind of mind-blowing. And you can go into almost any grocery store, almost anywhere in the country, any gas station, any deli, and you're going to find instant ramen there. I mean, it is all over the place.
That's Peter Kim, author of a cookbook, yes, a cookbook, called The Instant Ramen Kitchen. And it's great. We've also got great tips on cooking for kids if they're not old enough to make their own instant ramen, I guess. It's all coming up on the Splendid Table.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Amy Held. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is expected to announce new aggressive sanctions on Iran tomorrow. President Trump calling it economic D-Day. Iran says any country that participates in these efforts will be considered an enemy.
Keep right.
NPR's Adil El-Shalji reports.
President Trump has warned that the U.S. will wage new economic warfare against Iran this week. Iran has spent almost half a century weathering the weight of U.S. sanctions, with ordinary Iranians bearing the brunt of the consequences. Trump didn't outline details of the new punishment, but said that they would be, quote, unprecedented and aimed at forcing Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. In an interview on state TV, Iran's new security chief said that Iran would, quote, harm the interests of surrounding countries if they joined Trump's new economic war. Iran has been targeting U.S. military installations in the Gulf and Jordan since the beginning of the war. Adil El-Shalji, NPR News, Istanbul.
A trade war is upending decades of free trade between the U.S. and Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says they will put the tariff back after President Trump imposed 50% tariffs on Canadian goods. The detainment by Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents of a 5-year-old boy and his father has sparked controversy in Texas Public Radio's Jerry Clayton reports.
5-year-old Liam Tadeo and his father, Victor Martinez Nieto, are being held in family detention center in Dilley, Texas, after being picked up by ICE last week in Austin on the way to a soccer game. U.S. Representative Greg Casar of Austin took to social media and called for the release of the pair, along with all children at the facility, urging for what he called the trailer prison to be shut down.
Because kids should be playing soccer, going to school, living their lives, not being arrested on the streets.
Casar pointed to a similar case when a 5-year-old Minnesota boy was sent to and detained in Dilley, sparking a nationwide outcry. I'm Jerry Clayton in San Antonio.
The main event kicks off this hour in the nation's capital, hosting its first ever IndyCar race in celebration of 250 years of America. NPR's Ava Berger reports from the track at the National Mall.
At 8 a.m., fans were already sprinting into the National Mall. Not for the museums, for the cars. Decked out in American flag pants and a Freedom 250 shirt and hat, Cameron Graves already had a front row seat by 8 green flag around 1:15 p.m. to start the 250-mile race. Ava Berger, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR News. Arizona, California, and Nevada are preparing to head back to the negotiating table after the federal government cut 20% of the water they can use from the Colorado River over the next 2 years. What happens after 2028 remains an open question. So does what happens in upstream states that also rely on the river: Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico. Experts say more action is needed as climate change and drought lower levels in the river states have drawn on for years. Current cuts are expected to hit the Tucson and Phoenix areas the hardest. A judge has denied the motion for a new trial for a black teenager who was convicted in the fatal stabbing of a white teenager in Texas. Caroline Love from member station KERA reports that the case has received national attention.
Anthony was sentenced to 35 years in prison for the fatal stabbing of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf. A Texas judge denied the motion for a new trial on Saturday. Anthony's attorneys argued an off-the-record agreement between the defense and prosecution during the trial coerced Anthony to give up his right to testify and denied him a complete defense. Anthony's text messages revealed he regularly carried a knife and had a history of fighting. Metcalf and his brother served a year of probation for spraying graffiti that said Heil Hitler and kill all black people. Anthony's attorney said he plans to appeal. For NPR News, I'm Caroline Love in Dallas.
I'm Amy Held, and you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts. And the Public Welfare Foundation, committed to advancing transformative youth and criminal justice reforms.
Hey, it's Francis. This week, we're revisiting a visit with a couple of old friends, Peter Kim and David Mayfeld. Have a listen. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is The Splendid Table from APM. Whether you call this time of year back to school, or back to busy, or
Go
what are you
straight
even
on.
talking about? My kid's been in school for 6 weeks. There's no getting around the fact that the need to cook is ramping up. Your boss's out of office isn't on anymore. Neither is yours, for that matter. So whether you could use some ideas for feeding yourself or some little folks in your life efficiently and deliciously, we've got you covered today. Later in the show, we'll talk with David Mayfeld, a terrific chef in San Francisco, who got a crash course in learning how to feed his daughter as a single dad. And we'll start with instant ramen. Yes, those packets of 3-minute noodles. Because Peter Kim has just written a majestic book on how to make fantastic meals with those packets, called The Instant Ramen Kitchen. Now, Peter is what you might call an intellectual in the world of food. He was the founding director of the Museum of Food and Drink. He's also the founder of Infinite Table, which he describes as an immersive dining experience that combines 360-degree video, storytelling, and food to transport guests around the world. In short, he is not the first guy you'd guess who would write a real cookbook about the food college kids famously scarf in their dorm rooms. But I guess that's kind of his point. So hey, Peter, it's great to see you.
Hello, Francis.
So you literally founded a museum about food.
What?
You trained in culinary school. What do you say to all the people in your life who are now like, so you wrote a cookbook about instant ramen?
You know, I have to say, I think most people who know me well would not be so surprised.
Caution, please
Because,
mind
first of all, they've probably seen me eating some ramen, and they also know that I have this great love of sort of comfort foods, and certainly no aversion to convenience food. So I think it kind of, let's say, on brand, as the kids like to say.
I mean, look, I love it. So many people love it. It's actually interesting. I don't know that people necessarily have a sense of how I mean, it's one of these ubiquitous foods, right? Everyone knows instant ramen exists, but most people don't give it a second thought. But you have found some really incredible facts that highlight how popular it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in 2022, Americans consumed over 5 billion servings of instant ramen, which is kind of mind-blowing. And yeah, I mean,
Caution,
obviously,
please
like,
mind
anecdotally, we know, like, you can go into almost any grocery store, almost anywhere in the country, any gas station, any deli,
keep right,
and you're gonna find
and
instant
then
ramen
turn
there.
right.
I mean, it is all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, at 5 billion, my math is not that great, but like we have like 325, 350 million people in our country. Like, that's like 15 packets of instant ramen per American that year. And there are plenty of people don't eat 0 of them. So there's people out there eating like hundreds of these things. But you know, there's also this this idea of it, right? Like, oh, it's junk food, or like specifically for some reason people think of it as like, oh, that's just for like starving college kids. You know, it's like student food. But you reject that idea. Why does it deserve our respect?
Yeah, you know, I think it's something that has kind of bothered me for a while. If you find any news article about instant ramen, I just sort of hold my breath and scroll through and wait until you see that line where you'll see them say, this dorm favorite or this starving college student meal is, you know, you're going to find that line somewhere in the article.
Yeah, inevitably.
And the thing is, Francis, I mean, I think when you describe instant ramen in those terms, you're really not recognizing that for a lot of people, myself included, instant ramen isn't just dorm food or
go straight on
starving college student food. It's food. You know, it's something that's really a part of my own sort of cultural identity as a Korean American. It's a part of a lot of cultures around the world where people eat instant ramen as just a part of daily life. I point this out in the book, but obviously in Korea, you have instant ramen that's really just part of the sort of food culture there, and that's made evident by the fact that you see it in Korean movies all the time. In Japan,
like in
obviously.
Parasite, right? Like, you know, there's an Academy Award-winning movie, and like one of the sort of iconic moments in Parasite is the family eating instant noodles.
Yeah, that's right. They make chapaguri there, where they mix nuggery and chapaghetti into this dish that a lot of Koreans eat. And,
keep left.
But yeah, you'll find it in all sorts of cultures. I mean, in Mexico, there's a newspaper there that had once declared Mexico as Maruchan Nation. If you go to Nigeria, Indomie is actually synonymous with just noodles because people eat so much of that instant ramen brand. And so, you know, I think the thing that people maybe don't recognize is that instant ramen is really actually this sort of staple of many food cultures.
Yeah. Well, actually, and you know, I think here there's this idea like, oh, well, if it's instant, that means it's like a highly processed food. You know, like, you know, real, quote unquote, real food people wouldn't be into it. But again, to your point, it's like it is a staple of so many diets. And like, oh, we have plenty of highly processed foods that are staples of our, like, my kid eats breakfast cereal every morning. Like, loves breakfast cereal, but it's super highly processed food. So let me actually ask you a little bit about how it works, because I don't actually understand. And maybe you know a little bit of the history too. Like, but how did someone get noodles to cook in 3 minutes, and why is it so delicious?
Yeah, so most people credit a fellow named Momofuku Ando as being the person who really made the first commercially successful instant ramen. And it all happened in the aftermath of World War II. And so in that time, Japan was quite poor and was receiving a lot of food aid from the U.S., particularly in the form of wheat. And so that's when you saw a lot of wheat being introduced into the Japanese diet.
That's so interesting. Oh, as opposed to rice, yeah.
That's right, yeah. And so as the story goes, Momofuku saw a long line of people waiting to eat ramen at this sort of ramen stall in Osaka. And at that point he thought, hey, there must be some easier way to deliver ramen to people. And so he was an inventor, and he started experimenting with different ways of preparing noodles. And his big aha moment was when he tried frying the noodles which dried them out
Caution,
and made them
please mind the
shelf-stable.
speed.
But also importantly, it gave the noodles this sort of porous structure. That means that when you add hot liquid to these noodles, they hydrate very quickly and cook very quickly. And so that was a sort of big moment. And at that point, he had this product that was shelf-stable. It used wheat that was readily available and could cook, within minutes.
Oh, that's so interesting. So scientifically, what happens is the noodles they're made like quote unquote regular noodles, right? It's flour, it's water. They make the dough, they make the noodles, and then when you fry them, all the water in the dough evaporates out and creates tiny little micro holes that, like, when you put them back in boiling water, the water just soaks right back in.
That's right.
That's incredible.
I tip my hat to him. I mean, it's really something that, honestly, this innovation has, fundamentally changed the diets of people around the world. So it's a pretty massive contribution to culinary cultures around the world.
Yeah, and it's amazing to know, especially because of American wheat being, shipped to Japan post-World War II. So, like, it's really, I don't know if we fully appreciate, we think of instant ramen, it's like this snack food that we've imported and sort of like have a little bit of arm's length here. But it's like, no, we're like fundamentally responsible for the creation of instant ramen.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, again, moving away from like the sort of bad rap of it, the stigma of it, it's delicious.
Caution, please mind the speed.
And it's also like that speed is really important. That convenience really is important. Right now people are thinking about like, oh man, like kids going back to school, like feeding them snacks or being able to feed them a quick meal. It's an amazing thing to have in your back pocket, and you wrote this book to highlight ways that you can cook with it. Talk about that a bit. Like, what place does instant ramen have in a kitchen where you're also making quote-unquote real food?
Yeah, so the really incredible thing about instant ramen is the fact that if you can reach a stovetop, you can make it. Even a child can make instant ramen. And you can give that bowl of instant ramen to anybody, and they're likely going to find it very delicious, all the way up to a Michelin-starred chef.
Keep right, and then turn
through my work on the museum, I've been to quite a few culinary industry parties around New York City where I've seen, caviar being served, but also cup noodles, and chefs are very happy to eat that, and I think chefs know what is good, right? And so you have this product that kind of
Caution,
has
please
a
mind
superpower of being so easy to make that even a child can make it, but so delicious that even chefs at the highest echelon will find it delicious.
Yeah, and even like David Chang, right? Like, probably the most written about American chef, and maybe in my lifetime. His restaurants are called Momofuku in honor of the inventor of instant ramen. Like, that's literally why he named that restaurant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so the thing that's also amazing is you can find this incredibly powerful product in every store in America, and it's probably, you might even have a packet in your pantry right now, and it'll only cost you, maybe 50 cents. And
I'm bougie, so I buy like the $2 ones, but yeah.
Okay, for the rest of us, Francis. But yeah, it's one of these things that it's this kind of culinary superhero that's already in your pantry or already just around the corner. And when you cook with instant ramen, essentially what's in that packet guarantees deliciousness. The seasoning sachet has enough salt and umami and aromatics to really bring flavor into the dish, and I think that's something that a lot of home cooks struggle with, is just like seasoning food properly. And then the noodles provide enough of sort of a backbone to the meal that it's going to be nourishing. And so it's going to be nourishing, it's going to be flavorful. So the rest of it is just sort of,
it's all great.
It's only limited by your creativity. Exactly. Just imagine the flavors you want to bring in, and instant ramen is going to help take you there.
We're talking to Peter Kim, author of The Instant Ramen Kitchen. More with him in a minute. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is The Splendid Table from APM, American Public Media.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Central Market's weekday meals, with on-the-go breakfasts, oven-roasted sandwich meats, plus chef-prepared, ready-to-eat sides for dinner. More at centralmarket.com. Support comes from Baker Ripley, serving Greater Houston for more than 100 years, with programs supporting families, education, financial stability, and workforce. Find program details, volunteer information, and more at bakerripley.org.
I'm Maria Hinojosa. This week on Latino USA, Hollywood star Anthony Ramos opens up about leaving New York for Miami, recording a salsa album in English, and very openly talking about his mental health meltdown.
Your career to everyone looks like one thing, but your personal life, it was really hard for me to look at myself in the mirror and be like, I like that guy.
That's this week on Latino USA.
Sundays at 7 p.m. on News 88.7.
The Splendid Fate was supported by the National Gallery of Art, the nation's art museum. National Gallery members fuel creativity across the country. Join this community of art lovers from wherever you call home, starting at $75. Join today at nga.gov.
I'm Francis Lamb, and this is The Splendid Table, the show for curious cooks and eaters. We're talking quote-unquote kid food today, and right now it's all about the actual glories of instant ramen with Peter Kim. Let's get back to it with him. I grew up eating plenty of instant ramen, and to me, like, you know, you see the packet or you see like the ad or whatever, and it's always got, it's a bowl full of like all these toppings and like meats and vegetables and this beautiful composition, and like I just always just ate it straight. But you're talking about that, like you can add your toppings and add different forms of both flavor, texture, and nutrition, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up and first cooking with instant ramen, the first things you sort of learn to add in are eggs and scallions, and I think that's, at least in a Korean household. And the thing that's great is you can do it in all sorts of ways. You know, you can scramble it in the pot before adding the liquid. You can just drop it in and give it a twirl with your chopsticks or fork, or you can cook it separately and have like a jammy egg dipping on top. But really, the thing is, there's such a wide world of possibilities. I mean, just open up your fridge and take a look, and almost anything there could work. You know, if you have a sauce or a chutney or something that can be drizzled on. Maybe you have dumplings in the freezer, just drop that in and let it cook with the noodles. Cool. If you have prepared meats like kebabs or even like deli meat, that can be added in at the end, and you can let it warm up a bit if you want. Any vegetables, any salads, any stews can be used as a base to add flavor to your instant ramen. And then if you have any leftovers, like, you know, takeout, those can always be added in. So I find that it's really fun to just actually almost like reach at random at something in your fridge and then just taste what happens.
Yeah, and like that all-powerful flavor packet will just make it all delicious anyway.
That's absolutely right.
But you also have like specific recipes and like different ways to actually use the ramen. Tell me about a little bit, and this is probably gonna make all Italian listeners of this show never listen to our show again. But you have ramen aglio e olio. So classic like pasta aglio olio is pasta tossed in this very simple but beautiful sauce of olive oil and garlic and maybe a little pasta water to make it sort of creamy and come together. But you make it with instant ramen.
Yeah. All right. I have to start with the necessary disclaimer that all of the recipes in my book are simplifications of traditional dishes and do not purport to be actual authentic versions of the dish.
Look at you trying not to get canceled by Italy.
Well, I have enough experience with indignance around people reinventing Italian recipes, because obviously God created these recipes. But I do have a lot of respect for Italian traditions, I'm going to say that. But I do have a recipe for an interpretation of aglio e olio using instant ramen that, you know what, it's different, of course, from the traditional version, but it's really delicious in a different way because what happens when you use instant ramen is a few things. First of all, a lot of the preparation is something that an Italian who makes this dish a lot would recognize. You take olive oil, you gently cook the garlic slices in it, maybe a pinch of red pepper flakes, and then you add water. And as you would with instant ramen, add some of the seasoning sachet in there, and then you cook the noodles in it. And one thing that's, first of all, interesting there is that instant ramen, unlike Italian pasta, it actually fully cooks inside its sauce or its liquid, you know?
Right.
And so the flavor of that garlic goes into the water, and then that goes right into the noodles. So you have these very garlic-infused noodles that occur. The other thing that's interesting is you've brought this seasoning sachet in, which brings a real pop of umami into the dish, which you wouldn't normally have in aglio e olio. And so it just becomes a different kind of flavor profile that I find to be absolutely delicious. In my recipe, I finish it off with a flurry of parsley and then some uncooked olive oil, because I think it's nice to have the sort of fresh olive oil element. And then if you want, you can add some Parmesan cheese. So, people differ on whether you should put Parmigiano on your aglio e olio, but
how we got it.
There you go. And so, at the end you have this dish where it's instant ramen. The noodles don't have the same bite as say an Italian spaghetti, but it is so good, Francis. And I will tell you that I made this dish for a number of Italian friends of mine in the culinary industry, and held my breath, and I was just waiting for the flogging to happen afterward. I'm like, how can you do this to aglio e olio? But actually they were like, you know what, I hate to admit this, but this is really good. And it takes under 10 minutes. You know what I mean?
Did they put a towel over their head while they were eating it so no one could see? Okay, this is actually a really interesting thing too, because what you're saying is, so one thing that does differ with the instant ramen than say pasta noodles or whatever is the fact that when you look at the package instructions for instant ramen, they typically do give you a measured amount of water to use to cook the noodles. That's right. And the idea is because that's the amount of water that's calibrated for the seasoning. The seasoning will season that amount of water. But also because the ramen doesn't need a lot of water to cook in. You don't boil in a gallon of water like pasta does famously or whatever, right? So, but you're also doing a different way where you're not even boiling the pasta in a separate pot of water. You can put the noodle cake and then add water to it, almost like a sauce-like consistency rather than a broth, and it'll still cook the same. So following your recipe is one thing, but if you're just if for listeners who are oh, let me just go experiment with this, you can just sort of add a quarter cup of water at a time or whatever, and as it absorbs, just keep adding more water.
Yeah, and so first of all, the fact that it all can be done in one pot is something I find to be extremely convenient, especially if you're averse to doing a lot of dishes. So all of the recipes in my book don't require the use of anything more than one pot, and I actually get annoyed when I see on YouTube or something, somebody saying here's how to elevate your instant ramen, and then they present this recipe that requires 3 pots, 45 minutes, and all these ingredients, and I'm like, you've totally lost the spirit of instant ramen, which is simplicity and ease. But yeah, so the fact that the noodles cook in the liquid means that you can really adjust the amount of liquid you add to the pot to achieve a different result. So I have a chart in the book that details this, but if you start with the generally recommended amount, which is 2 cups of liquid to cook your noodles, you're going to end up with a nice bowl of soup noodles. If you go down to half a cup or 3/4 of a cup, then that's all actually going to evaporate or be absorbed into the noodles, and then you end up actually with a dry noodle. And that's what's good for, say, the aglio e olio recipe. In between, you can end up with something, the beets as they cook, and then they're in the liquid, and again, the noodles are cooking in the liquid, so you end up with this sort of iridescent pink noodles, which I find to be quite beautiful, actually. And again, the seasoning sachet does so much work for bringing the flavor that it allowed me with this borscht recipe to really trim down the ingredients to just a handful of things. You just need bacon, beets, cabbage, tomato paste, and then a little sour cream to go on top, and some dill frogs to garnish. And then you actually end up with this dish it totally evokes borscht. Again, not a traditional borscht, of course, but it totally evokes the flavor of it. It's very delicious. Again, it has all the umami from the instant ramen. Plus, you have the noodles in there, so you don't even need to have a side dish to complement the borscht. And yeah, I've actually made this for Ukrainian friends of mine, and again, they have begrudgingly admitted that, you know what, this is actually like pretty delicious.
I like the subtext of this whole book is like, I tried to offend all my friends, and none of them were actually offended.
Yeah, no, it's so true.
What about your Brazilian friends?
Yeah, so actually, I did cook that for some Brazilian friends who are very fond of moqueca.
Okay, tell us what moqueca is in its original form.
Yeah, so moqueca is a Brazilian seafood stew. It has a sort of pepper base to it, like a bell pepper base, and it's made. The soup is fortified with coconut milk or coconut cream, and then you have different kinds of seafood. It really depends on what variation of moqueca you're having, and then depending also on the variation, you might have this sort of red palm oil, or you might have olive oil. But yeah, it's a really delicious sort of classic dish from a couple different regions in Brazil, and it turns out it also turns into a really great dish using instant ramen. No surprise.
And your Brazilian friends were okay with this?
So Francis, I actually have the tasting notes from when I served this to my friends, and my Brazilian friend wrote, incredible. The coconut, seafood, and cilantro came together. A winner.
Oh, so, my goodness. Look at that. Well, all right, Peter, this has been a fun journey around the world with you. And I need to tell you about the instant ramen subscription service I have. We'll talk about that after.
Yes, I'll be happy to hear about it. Thank you, Francis.
Peter Kim is the founder of Infinite Table, and his book is The Instant Ramen Kitchen. He left us with his controversial recipe for aglio e olio instant ramen. You can find it at splendidtable.org. So when I first met David Nafeld, he was a line cook at a restaurant, 11 Madison Park, that was well on its way to being crowned literally the best restaurant in the world. We hit it off, and we'd hang out at exactly the kind of restaurants that line cooks like to go to. Late-night yakitori bars and noodle shops. At work, though, he was a machine. Chef's whites, precise movements, tweezers. I figured he, like everyone else in that kitchen, was aiming to have his own Michelin-starred temple one day. And so I was honestly kind of surprised when he did open his own place, K-Fito in San Francisco. It is a rollicking pasta and pizza joint. The food is incredibly well made, but it's the kind of place where you're never made to feel like, you're supposed to be bowing at the chef's altar. And then we were talking about, I guess what you'd call his next cooking project. And I realized that he'd arrived at the most important kitchen in his career. His home kitchen, where he feeds his daughter as a single dad every time he gets to see her. And it has been such a human experience to witness. This super talented chef really, truly committing himself to the simple act of developing a relationship with his kid in the kitchen that they share. His new book, Dad, What's for Dinner, is all about that. How to cook for and with the kids in your life. So hey, Chef, how are you?
Doing well, thank you very much for having me.
So obviously you, and I know this, but people might not at home, but you and I met once. Actually, the first time we met was in the middle of dinner service while you were cooking on a line at truly one of the best restaurants in the world. I was standing next to your station all night long. And I just remember thinking, this dude can move. Like just your motions, your movements, it was so clear that you were so super skilled. You have these incredible cooking chops. And now you have, award-winning restaurants later. But cooking for your kids is an entirely different universe. So what was the hardest part for you about learning how to be a home cook for family?
Just different moves, bro.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I remember that night actually clearly. The thing is, and this is a large part as to why I wrote this book, is I think that it's so astute of you to point out the moves, right? And I think the moves is what makes great cooks great cooks. And it's the thing that you need to learn. It's the muscle memory. It's the efficiency. It's the how you have to move less to achieve more. And the same thing can be ascribed to, being a homemaker, right? And it's not even about being a parent. It's about how do you, cook food for people who, need to make it to bedtime, need to make it to bath time, to make it to soccer, need to make it to school, while also getting yourself taken care of, while also keeping the kitchen relatively clean and not creating a disaster, right? And so at some point I became the, primary caregiver of my daughter. And, I started to have these, thoughts like, man, what I do for a living, what I've always done for a living really actually lends itself really well to being a homemaker, right? Like for obvious reasons, right? And so what I wanted to convey in the book is that there are ways that you can make your life easier. There are ways that you can create efficiencies and declutter. There's a way that you can cook in a way that you can use less things to cook with. And yes, there is the grand way of cooking in 3 Michelin star restaurants where you use one pan for one item and that each dish has 8 pans that bring together the most perfect dish. But that's not what we're doing here, right? What we're doing is more akin to what I call in restaurants, or what the majority of people in our industry call family meal, right? And what you're trying to do there is, hey, I already have a job to do. And while I have a job to do, I need to cook for up to 100 people and make sure, A, that it's delicious.
Like as like something on the side.
Yeah, and that's my side
doing.
gig right now that I got to do while I'm setting up my job. And that's much more like cooking for your family.
So, and obviously you map that onto the home, right? You have these skills you've developed professionally, but like making a great homemaker, which is sort of funny, I think, for like folks who like have read or seen about the crazy restaurant lifestyle, like watch Carmy and the Bear, and he's got shoes in his oven at home or whatever. But that's one version of that life. And another version of life is the one you're talking about, which is, how do I actually get myself organized and efficient so mealtime isn't hard? So you can do these things that you call meltdown meals in your book, which is brilliant. It's like, you can get this thing done before your kid fully implodes from anger.
Yeah.
You can actually make pancakes, special pancakes, in like 8 minutes.
Probably less.
Tell us about them.
Well, I have to give a lot of that credit to my fiance, Vanessa. I was, in terms of, pancakes, I was like an ardent believer. Like, hey, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. So this is like a process, and you got to whip egg whites and everything like that. And then when she and I moved in together, and ultimately we started to have the kids around each other, she actually had this great hack for taking, a prepackaged mix of pancake mix. Bob's Red Mill is a terrific brand that I really like. And she would kind of like, fancify it a little bit. And when I say fancify it, I mean more just give it awesome flavor, right? She would like crush a banana into it and add, vanilla or cinnamon or whatever she would do. And to me, I was like, man, this is actually really brilliant. And I remember tasting them one time and saying, like, this is really good, except for she did not have the understanding of how to cook a pancake correctly, right? And so she would mix this great mix, and then she would do this thing where she would kind of like cook it like on low heat and not really understand the exact way that the butter should be foaming, the exact heat of the pan, and so on and so forth, which a lot of people are normally afraid of, right? That's a very, very common thing for people who don't cook for a living. And so I started, when I started to take over the duties, she would be like, no, do the pancake mix. That's like what my kid wants. And I'm like, okay, great, I'll do that. And the pancakes were coming out really, really well. And I tasted them, and I was like, this is actually a really excellent pancake. And so I was like, there's something here. I feel like people should know how easy this is. I can get that pancake on the table in like 5 minutes flat. And I think that was like definitely something that opened my mind to the idea of, not everything needs to be the most perfect version, right? You can't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? Like sometimes kids need to get out the door, and sometimes, right, like getting them fed something super delicious with a premix of something you believe in, that's good enough, and that's going to work in.
David Mayfeld's cookbook is called Dad, What's for Dinner? We'll be back with more with him in a minute. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is The Splendid Table from American Public Media.
Did you know your gift to Houston Public Media could go twice or even 3 times as far through your employer's matching gift program? Many companies will match the charitable donations of their employees, and some even match gifts from retirees. That means your support for trusted news and programs could have double the impact for our community. Find out if your company participates at houstonpublicmedia.org/match.
I'm Anita Rao. Embodied is WUNC's weekly radio show and podcast about sex, relationships, and health. Join me to meet people who aren't afraid to question what we think we know about intimacy, who are embracing the unique ways their bodies shape their lived experience, and who have some fascinating stories to share about their relationships. We'll take on the taboo together, next time on Embodied.
Sundays at 8 p.m. on News 88.7.
The Splendid Table is supported by Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs, designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. I'm Francis Lamb, and you're listening to The Splendid Table. We're talking about cooking for and with kids with David Mayfeld, a chef whose most important title is Dad. Let's get back to it with him.
Well, let me ask you this. Like, another thing that, parents often stress, or caregivers often stress about when feeding their kids is like, getting their kids to eat vegetables, right? What do you think of the whole sneak in the vegetables thing?
Yeah, I love it. I'm not a new wave parent by any stretch of the imagination. I will completely, bamboozle my kids if that means, it's in their best interest, right? I'm not like, oh my God, you can't tell them,
radically transparent with our children.
Yeah, no, you don't. My kid can't spell yet, right? There's no radical transparency here, right? When you start paying the bills, we'll talk about transparency. No, look, I love the idea because, what's your job? Your job is to take care of this little human and make sure that they are, the best taken care of that you can achieve, right? And so with vegetables, my daughter will go through phases. For example, last year, I thought, I could not feed her enough asparagus. She loved it. The key to the asparagus was make sure it was still crunchy, and make sure there was tons of lemon on it, and she would just absolutely annihilate it almost before I could get it to the table. Recently, in the past couple months, it was, I don't really like asparagus. I think the best ways to get vegetables into kids' diet are through the vehicles of soup or pasta for a number of reasons. And look, not all kids love soup, or not all kids will eat everything that's in pasta, and I have ways around that as well. Now, but I'm just really fortunate that my daughter will really house massive bowls of soup with really kind of no problem whatsoever. One of the key things that I suggest is cutting the vegetables smaller when you're doing them in soup and pasta. So that way they don't really have a choice, right? It all fits on a spoon. It's not flopping off. It's not like ginormous pieces of kale that they can kind of pick out. You just kind of make it that they don't have a choice. You chop it all up. And the key to getting your kids to love soup is all kids like brothy soup, right? And so making sure it's a little bit more brothy. Making sure that the vegetables are cooked well enough to where they're not chewing on them for too long, especially in the soup. And making sure that the soup has flavor profiles that appeal to kids. To me, I have not met a kid that doesn't like something that has a little, lemon in it, right? The lemon goes a long way. Now, if you've got a completely picky eater who's I'm not going to pick it, then that's what the blender is for, right? Pureeing some of those veg and pouring it back into the soup. Some of the fiber is broken down, but look, like I said, you're not trying to make perfect be the enemy of good here. With pasta, I find it to be much of the same, right? Like if you're making a ragu, like a good ragu with like pork and beef and tomato or whatever, then like there's nothing wrong. This isn't. I'm not trying to be the most authentic, bolognese on the planet, right? Like if you've got some extra kale, chop that up, really finely and put it in there. All of those things are a go. Spinach, everything like that. My fiance, every time we make a smoothie in the house, she takes, 4, 5, 6 leaves of spinach and she'll put it into the smoothie. The kids are none the wiser, right? It's a dog eat dog game out there. You gotta get it where you can. And, with parenting, I mean, everybody understands, right? And sometimes you get lucky. My big thing with getting your kids to eat vegetables, like as a standalone dish, right, is like textures. Kids, just like, larger kids, meaning adults, are big on textures, right? Like it takes a while for people to get into something that's like gummy and gelatinous, right? That takes time, and that's also cultural, right? But like I think a lot of kids, when they have a veg, they like there to be an element of texture and crunch to it, right? So if you're going to give them something that's super overcooked, right, don't be surprised when they're like, I don't like this. This is like mushy and gross. So cooking things quickly on high heat, adding lemon, adding, those flavor components that are like nice and poppy. And, for me, like I like introducing spice to kids early. And, just a little bit at a time gets them liking the foods that you like, right? So you're like manipulating their palate over time to eat like a normal human and not like a, person you're embarrassed of.
Like a stereotypical kid, yeah. That's a little tough.
Look, it's a tough world out there, bro.
Or, I mean, the other thing you do, just to stick on vegetables for one more moment, is, you could serve them vegetables that they love. Everyone loves corn. And you have this great recipe for creamy corn and green beans. It's a little bit also to this idea of hiding. Like, actually, my kid happens to love green beans, but it's not always everyone's favorite. But everyone does love corn. So you chop up the green beans corn size and you cook them together. Tell us about that recipe and just walk us through it real quick.
Yeah, and so like you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, many kids like corn for the sweetness. It's definitely not the most nutritionally dense, food out there. But it's certainly not bad for them. And in the right, season, it's great. And so I want to add other elements to it. So, you add some green beans, which frankly taste like whatever you mix them with. And now they taste like corn. And now they taste like creamy corn. But here's another thing, right? And I know that there's parents right now listening who are undoubtedly going to say, well, if my kid sees something green in there, they're not going to eat it, right? And this is my message to everyone. And I know what I'm saying here. I know it's a challenge, but like we as a society need to stop letting our kids get away with that nonsense. Like we just need to, seriously, we just need to be like, cool, then you're not hungry. You're just not hungry. And I don't mean that in like an extreme fashion, right? Like my daughter doesn't like shrimp. It makes her truly, the texture of shrimp makes my daughter vomit. I'm not going to force her to eat shrimp, right? Because that's just cruel and unusual punishment, right? But in terms of something green, like it's just a thing you've made up in your mind. And to me in my house, the way I look at it is like, okay, so you're not hungry enough. Come back to the table when you are. I have to put my foot down sometimes when it comes to things that I know are just like, they're just in your mind and you've just decided that, right? And it's not something where you genuinely, truly don't like it. You've just decided you don't want something green. And so, that is kind of where this dish comes into play, which is like, look, the majority of kids like corn. There's no chance you're going to be able to discern a green bean from this dish, right? But what you are going to get is you're going to get a little bit more nutrition in your diet, you're going to get a little bit more diversity, and you're going to eat corn. They just happen to have green beans in them too. And so like, and the creaminess really makes it like super velvety and delicious, and it's tangy, and there's lemon like always, right, which kind of cuts through the fat, and it's really, really delightful to eat. And I think it's a great starter way of getting, kids into eating things that maybe otherwise they might not, Like if your kid told me they don't like corn, then I'd be like, okay, maybe this dish is not for you. But like, because you don't like green things, I'm sorry, kid. Like The world we live in has great.
You saute corn and green beans together. You put some cream in there. You put a squeeze of lemon. It's gonna be delicious.
Yeah.
Enough salt, and you're gonna be good to go. I want to talk to you about another thing, a technique thing. And this is a little bit like sort of chefy, but I think actually is a really good technique to have in the home because, I remember reading a lot when our kid was really small of the importance of feeding children fish, and in particular, fatty fish, like fish oils. It's so great for brain development. It's just so good for you, period. And a lot of people don't really love fish, don't love cooking fish at home, but getting back to your thing about texture, a crispy skin fish, a crispy skin salmon, which is, obviously a very, oil-rich fish, is incredible, and everyone loves it. You go at great lengths to describe how you get crispy skin on a fillet of salmon, so walk us through that technique.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. This is a tough one, right? Like, people sometimes either are scared of cooking fish at home, they don't have a good source to get fish.
Keep right.
They're afraid their kids aren't going to eat it. They don't like the way their house smells, right? And so, in one sense, if you are a family that lives in a very small apartment that doesn't have a hood over your stove, and you don't like when things smell after you cook them, which is what my situation was when I started writing this book, that's when I created the one dish halibut with the vegetables, which everything goes into that dish and then gets baked, right? And the halibut is a white fish. It's very easy on the palate. Like, kids really are not going to discern that they're like, is this fish? Like, there's not those
it's very neutral.
It's very neutral in flavor, right? But if you do have a hood and you're willing to cook fish on a stove, this to me is one of the best ways to introduce fish to your kids, besides maybe fish sticks or fried fish, right? Which, by the way, if you were to take our chicken nugget recipe and just substitute fish, you could get the same outcome and just give your kids fried fish. So that's just a kind of aside. Now, when it comes to the salmon, the thing that really you're looking for here is the science behind it is, if there any wetness, any moisture that is on the skin of the salmon is an impediment to you getting crispy skin. Now, it is not impossible that you put a wet piece of salmon in a pan and eventually you get a crispy skin. It is just a barrier to entry. Now, the more barriers to entry you remove before that skin ever touches the pan, the closer you are to success before you've even started. Now, the best ways to do that are taking a knife and scraping it against the skin, so the opposite direction of where the scales are. And if you're not aware of that, you just look at the patterns of what the scales are and you rub the knife in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And that does what I affectionately call deschmutzing it. And once you scrape it, you'll see on the knife there's a little bit of schmegma, right? Like a little bit of schmutz. And you just need to kind of wipe that off the knife and wipe it off, the skin, and make sure that it's bone dry then. Then is the second element, and this is a great science discussion for the kids at home that I love, where you talk about osmosis. And so you take salt and you sprinkle it over the the skin of the salmon and over the entire salmon, and you let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, and you tell your kids, hey, look, 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to create water on this salmon. And in 5 to 10 minutes, they come over and they're like, oh my God, it was dry, now it's wet again, because the salt has pulled out the moisture of the salmon, through this incredible scientific process. And so I think that's a really cool, fun thing to show your kids. Then you pat it dry again. Now what you're working with is something that not only has been dried on the exterior, but now you've dried it on one level lower in the interior, right? Then the other thing is, I know that we're in a world in which nonstick pans have a whole, variance of grievances, and I agree with some of them, and some of them are fine. But I will say that if you really are using a stainless steel pan just because I don't want to futz around. So like a non-stick pan is fine here, but if you have a stainless steel pan, it is 100% achievable to get the skin in the pan and not stick it. The key to it is proper heat. You have to heat the pan to a high point of heat before you ever put any oil in. A lot of people also make the mistake of putting oil in the pan and start heating it from cold. That is not the way to do it. The reason being is because then you start to heat the oil at the same temperature and the same progression as the metal in the pan is heating. The problem with that is oil has a natural smoke point, which is much lower than the heat that the pan can get to without starting to like burn or smoke, right?
So you actually want the pan hotter than what the oil can take.
Exactly, to start, right? So then what happens is everything's nice and ready. You got your salmon, you've stripped it of any schmutz, you've salted it, had it dry, you're ready to rock. You've got your high heat oil. Look, I still cook with extra virgin olive oil just because I feel comfortable doing that. Like I don't smoke it out completely. But avocado oil is great too.
Turn left.
A lot of people, they cook with vegetable oil or grapeseed oil, whatever you want, whatever you use in your house is fine. You heat the stainless steel pan till it's hot, right, on high heat, and then you add the fat, the oil that you're using, right? What's going to happen is it's going to start to lightly smoke almost immediately. You don't want it to be so hot that it like catches fire, right? Like you want to, it's managing the heat appropriately though. But if you put your oil in and you sense the oil is not hot whatsoever, you're not heating your pan enough. And then putting enough fat at the bottom of the pan to where you put the skin down and it's completely like in full contact with fat, right?
Yeah, that's like level.
Yeah, it's level, right? And then you just let it be. You take a spatula, you push it down in the center, because what's going to happen is the salmon's going to bow slightly, and the center is going to have where the steam pocket is. You're going to take a spatula, you're going to push it down so that steam escapes, and then just let it hang out, let it party in the pan for, 1 to 2 minutes without you trying to mess with it, without you trying to jiggle it, whatever. Just let it be. And I promise you that if you heat the pan up hot enough and you dried the skin well enough, that skin is not going to be sticking to the pan. Nice hot pan, nice dry salmon, good amount of oil. You put it in, press it down, let it go for 2 minutes. It's not going to stick. And then you just let it stay. Let it keep cooking. Stop. Don't flip it around. Don't do it. You're going to cook the salmon about 80 to 85% of the way on the skin side and get it nice and crispy. And you're only going to flip it over for the last like 20 to 30 seconds, and then you're done.
Yeah. And then you have this beautiful, crackly skin. Every kid's going to love it. Every adult's going to want to eat it. And you're going to feel great knowing your kid is getting all this brain development. Thank you so much, David. It's great to talk with you.
I really appreciate you having me.
David Nayfeld's book is called Dad, What's for Dinner? And his awesome San Francisco Bay Area restaurants are called K-Fico. He left us with his kid-friendly recipe for zucchini parmigiana. Find it at splendidtable.org. And that is our show for the week. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk to you again next week. Go make something delicious today. We have a lot going on top of our weekly show. Check out our newsletter, Weeknight Kitchen. You get a new recipe every week delivered right to your inbox from some of the best and brightest food writers working today. When you sign up, one lucky person a month will win a copy of a brand new cookbook from some of the season's best. Go to splendidtable.org/giveaway. The Splendid Table was created by Sally Swift and Lynn Rossetto Casper and was made this week by technical producer Jennifer Lukey, producers Erica Romero and Maria Wortel, and managing producer Sally Swift. Jordan Turgeon's our digital producer with help from Delonix
and
Quinn,
then continue
and
straight
Lauren
on.
Humpert is our senior podcast production manager. Thank you for listening. I'm Francis
straight
Lamb,
on.
and this is APM, American Public Media.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8, enjoy a new behind-the-scenes look at Season 6 of All Creatures Great and Small at 7:30. Then enjoy encores of Season 3 of Downton Abbey at 9. Tonight on TV 8.
We have all been there, screaming in front of the TV after seeing our kicker
Caution,
miss what
please
feels
mind
like an
speed.
easy field goal.
I mean, the most common sticky thing is to like look at a football game on TV and watch a kicker miss one and go, I could have done that.
Could you have done that? We sit down with Stefan Fatsis, a journalist who trained with the Denver Broncos to learn what it actually takes to play in the NFL. Join me, David Green, for WHYY Sports in America.
Sundays at 5 p.m. on News 88.7. Your NPR station, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at houstonpublicmedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
I'm Christopher Kimball, and this is Milk Street Radio. Justin Davies has walked past thousands of trees in the mountains of Utah, but he never thought about eating one until he stopped in front of a spruce with bright green tips.
And I pluck one off and pop it in my mouth, and I'm really blown away by the flavor of it. I didn't expect a spruce tree to have a bright, lemony, sour flavor. That was not what I would have expected to come out of that.
Now, you can pickle spruce tips, you can make infusions, but Justin also started to wonder what it might be like to just eat wood.
I'm cutting into this piece of wood. It smells really interesting. I wonder what this might taste like as ice cream.
Today, Justin reveals the trees that make the best desserts and the worst.
They have a very unmistakable odor. A boys' dorm room, I guess you could say.
How to Eat a Tree, that's coming up on Milk Street Radio from PRX after the news.
Turn left.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Amy Held. Canadians appear to overwhelmingly support their Prime Minister Mark Carney's response to the trade war with the U.S. Dan Karpenchuk reports from Toronto.
Provincial premiers from across the country say Trump has gone too far, and all, with the exception of Alberta, say it's time to fight back. They agree it will be tough on Canadians. Jobs will be lost and businesses closed because of President Trump's 50% tariffs. Many business leaders, such as the Canadian Steel Producers Association, agree that no deal is better than a bad deal. Fans at Major League Soccer matches in Montreal and Vancouver booed the U.S. national anthem Saturday. Many people promised to shun American alcohol. Ottawa's retaliation begins on September the 8th, targeting U.S. sectors including steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, pulp and paper, and electronics. For NPR News, I'm Dan Karpenchuk in Toronto.
Economists say Trump's tariffs on Canada will mean higher prices for U.S. consumers. At the same time, polls show more voters say cost of living is a top issue, and just a third approve of Trump's handling of the economy. NPR's Mara Liasson reports Trump is ramping up his efforts to support Republican candidates running in the midterm elections.
Trump is concerned that Republican voters will not turn out in November if he's not on the ballot. Here he is at a rally for Republican Senator Darlene Graham in South Carolina.
What I really want you to do is pretend, please, that I'm on the ballot. Just come and vote. It's so important.
That argument may encourage Trump supporters to turn out even if he's not on the ballot. But if Republicans do poorly in November, it will also allow him to argue that it wasn't a repudiation of him since he wasn't on the ballot. Mara Liasson, NPR News.
Another big storm means more flooding and winds for Hawaii as the state still recovers from Hurricane Lala. NPR's Chandalise Duster reports.
Tropical storm Moke is bringing heavy rains and gusty winds to the Big Island of Hawaii and other islands through Monday. The National Weather Service says the tropical storm is not expected to make landfall, but could drop more than a foot of rain across the Big Island. Rainfall from Moke could produce life-threatening flooding and mudslides, especially in areas affected by Hurricane Lala, which hammered the Big Island a week ago. Heavy rainfall from Lala triggered floods and mudslides that destroyed roads, homes, and bridges. More than 8,000 people were still without power as of Saturday morning ahead of Moke's arrival. Chandalise Duster, NPR News.
In a first and last, according to organizers, the streets of downtown D.C. have become a racetrack for the Freedom 250 Grand Prix. President Trump waved the green flag for dozens of race cars approaching speeds of 200 miles per hour for 147 laps around the National Mall. It's one of several events Trump has spearheaded this summer in celebration of the nation's 250th, some by executive order, bypassing Congress. This is NPR News. At least 22 people were killed early today in Guinea after a mountainous heap of garbage collapsed in the largest landfill in the capital, Conakry. That's according to the West African nation's Civil Protection Service. Heavy rains washed over the refuse, triggering the landslide that buried nearby shacks. For decades, the U.S. has served adults with disabilities in their communities rather than in institutions. NPR's Janaki Mehta reports the Trump administration is trying to reverse that.
Siblings Kaylee and Cody Brendel grew up near the Jersey Shore. Both of them are blind, and Cody, who's 27, also has autism. And after high school, for years, he was in a kind of limbo. Until now, his family has found a community-based program funded by Medicaid where he learns life skills like job training at Jersey Mike's, where he loves bopping lettuce.
You have to bang it down a couple times to loosen the cord.
But now, the Justice Department has said it will no longer enforce a legal protection that says states must provide services for adults with disabilities in their community. Here's Cody's sister, Kaylee.
That affects everything. Integrated setting affects school, where you can work. It affects the community-based programs like what my brother uses.
The law hasn't changed, but the administration may no longer enforce it. Janaki Mehta, NPR News.
A heads up, literally, this week features a near total lunar eclipse.
Let's do this.
Thursday into Friday, Earth's shadow will cover around 96% of the moon. If skies stay clear, it will be visible to billions across North and South America, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Cy Sims Foundation. Since 1985, supporting advances in science, education, and the arts towards a fairer, more just, and civil society. More information is available at cysimsfoundation.org.
Turn right.
This is Mill Street Radio from PRX, and I'm your host, Christopher Kimball. Today, we're wandering into the woods in search of dessert. Justin Davies has made a name for himself as a forager who can turn cedar into ice cream and oak into cookies. Plus, later in the show, Lydia Bastianich makes her return to the phone lines. She's ready to answer all of your Italian cooking questions. She'll even share her philosophical take on pesto.
You know, use your senses. Use your olfactory. When you're buying basil, put it to your nose. You have a great machine there that will tell you.
But first, we're getting a taste of Vietnam. Chef Anais Kayao Van Manen joins me now. For her upcoming cookbook, she traveled across the country to experience the full range of Vietnamese cooking. Anais, welcome to Mill Street.
Thank you for having me.
I've been to Vietnam briefly years ago. Fell in love with everything about it, especially the food.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is you talk a lot about the North versus the South. So let's start with the North.
Yeah.
What's distinctive about the cooking of the North?
Well, I think, it starts with the climate. The North has clearly 4 seasons. So obviously your ingredients will be different. And it's also, the way I see it's the cradle of Vietnamese culture, while the South has gone through a lot more transformation, and it only has 2 seasons. Monsoon are really hot and dry. So I think a lot of food starts with the ingredients and the weather where they come from.
So let's talk about some of the recipes. Like, I love recipes where the techniques are different because,
at the roundabout,
we're all bound by the rigid techniques we learned growing up. And mine were probably mostly French.
Exit now.
There was one, you cook a chicken leg, and you start by taking a knife and cutting slits in the skin, and then you let it sit in hot boiling water for 5 minutes, right? So you want to just take us through that recipe a little bit?
So I think you're talking about garouti. So garouti is actually a play on roasted chicken in French. Roti means roasted, but for a very long time, still now, Vietnamese people, we don't really have ovens in our kitchen. We don't use ovens. We use live fire and gas. Now air fryer is the newest equipment. People would rather have an air fryer than oven. So this is their way of roasting a chicken. In Vietnam, we always blanch the meat first because that will remove the impurities. By either poaching quickly in hot water or pouring boiling water on top of the chicken, you remove the scum. So then whenever you're cooking it, you will have less scum. So you'll make, for example, a clearer stock. And then when you slit the chicken, is so that it could absorb more the marinade. And then you want to have the shallot and the garlic to flavor your oil while you fry the chicken. But then you want to remove them because you don't want them to burn.
Right.
And then, for me, one of my favorite ingredients in Vietnamese cuisine is coconut water. We have so much coconut water here, and so we use it in everything. So yeah, so then you use that sweetness, the natural sugar from your coconut and your soy to reduce and glaze your chicken so that by the time your chicken is done, it melts in your mouth and it has that sweet and salty texture, gooey caramelization on top of it. It's really good with rice, plain rice.
It really caught my attention. The other one I really loved, the sticky rice with fresh corn and coconut milk.
Ooh, simple, but so good, right?
Rice paper salad. I've never heard of this. So you want to explain this to me?
So one of the ingredients I think that makes really Vietnamese food Vietnamese is bánh tráng, rice paper. We use it to wrap. We grill it so it becomes crispy, and then we use it to dip. And so for this particular dish, I think you're talking about bánh tráng trộn. So this is like a classic snack. It's very simple. So rice paper, dry, it's pretty dry, right? But then if you mix it with a nice sauce, which is in the book, and a bunch of different things like mango for acidity, hot mint, rau ram, or Vietnamese coriander for like that punch of freshness, peanuts, and all this thing, the rice paper absorbs the sauce and suddenly it becomes a little bit more chewy. And then you go into this texture play in your mouth, and you have dried beef to go with this spicy dry beef, bok ho, like beef jerky, Vietnamese beef jerky. And if you go to in front of a school at 4 p.m., you'll see loads of ladies selling those. And the fun part of it is that you can actually ask them to put whatever you want inside it, and you put it in a plastic bag and just shake it, and then you eat it, and it's super easy to share with people or to eat it on the street, you know?
So you've lived in lots of places, Paris, London, Bogota, Brussels, etc. So what did you learn about cooking outside of Vietnam you think was actually pretty valuable even when cooking back in Vietnam?
I think the best part of food is that it's always evolving, right? When I came back here, I brought what I learned from French cooking, but then I applied to Vietnamese flavor. For example, I would do like a bœuf bourguignon, but then I would infuse it with flavors that remind me of Vietnamese bò kho. And then I would serve, instead of serving this bœuf bourguignon on its own like this, I would then serve it with a really fresh herb salad on top of it. And with rice that's been flavored with like basil butter, and then and not just plain butter. So I think as we travel more and as we learn more about different culture, we realize that yes, there are boundaries, but the fun part of food is to be able to combine things and to be playful, but as well as respectful of other people's culture.
So you visited the north of Vietnam and, among other things, tasted some fried tree worms, which you actually liked. Could you just describe that?
Yeah, so while I was in the north, I learned from the villages that back in the days, you know, if you're raising pig or a buffalo, you want to keep it for special occasion because you didn't really have a place to store it. So the main protein were smaller animals like chicken, or during autumn, it would be bamboo tree worms. So you would knock onto the bamboo tree to figure out if it would be hollow, and then cut down the tree, take those worm out, and then just fry it in oil and lime leaves.
You knock on it
Yeah.
to see if it's hollow.
Yeah.
Cut the stalk down, and then it has worms in it.
It has to be hollow. That's the thing.
Right.
Because if it's hollow, that means that the worm went inside and ate it. And you know, you make a sound. It's like, you know, if you have like a wall with nothing behind, it makes a different sound.
Right.
And actually, it's really delicious because it's crispy and it's a really good protein replacement, you know?
Well, you know, my experience is
please mind
you can fry anything.
Yeah, I agree.
It tastes good.
If you don't know what to do with it, just fry it.
There's a folk song which I'd like you to translate for me. I mean, it's in English, but the chicken squawks in the lemon leaves, the pig grunts, buy me some green onions, the dog cries sitting and standing, grandma, go to the market and buy me some galangal. What is that folk song?
So, my middle name is Kayao, and Kayao in Vietnamese means folk song. And these folk songs were passed on from my great-grandmother to my mom to teach her the way to cook, and as well for the way you pair food. So in this proverb, chicken goes with lime leaves. We always pair chicken with lime leaves. And you have kaya for everything, for the way you behave, and as well for the way to live life.
Anais, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Love the book, and I can't wait to get cooking. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I hope we get to meet and cook together one day.
Hopefully. Thank you so much.
It's been great.
That was Anais Kayao van Manen. Her upcoming book is Vietnam, the Cookbook. This is Milk Street Radio. I'm your host, Christopher Kimball. Right now, Lydia Bastianich is back. She's returned as our guest co-host to take more of your Italian cooking calls. Lydia, by the way, is a restaurateur, cookbook author, also host of Lydia's Kitchen on public television.
Go straight
Hello,
on.
Lydia. Thanks so much for being with us again here at Milk Street.
Oh, my pleasure being here.
Before we get to the calls, I do have a question. Now, I was in Rome a while back, and I was in a restaurant, and we made rabbit cacciatore. Now, white wine, lots of vinegar, right. A whole bunch of it. Rosemary, garlic, it was great. Now, a lot of cookbooks, when you look up chicken cacciatore, it's, Hunter's chicken with tomato, etc. But I don't think it was originally tomato-based, right?
I love rabbits, so I'm glad you're asking me this. No, it doesn't have to be tomatoes. Tomatoes only came to Italy after the discovery of America. So what did those Romans eat? What did, they ate coniglio in bianco, in white. Vinegar they used, wine they used, absolutely. But rabbit, my grandmother, when I was a young child, after World War II, she had all the foods around the courtyard. We had chickens, we had ducks, we had 2 pigs, and we had rabbits. And I would go out and forage for clover for the rabbits because they love clover. Then Sunday came and one would end up in the pot. And it was usually lots of rosemary, garlic, onions too, and vinegar. Absolutely. It was in a kind of white sauce that turned out a little bit brownish. Although now, the addition of tomato paste is common in my area, in the north area. Not so much a lot of tomato. But cacciatore. Cacciatore means a hunter. So it just means any animal that the hunter caught, made in his style, whatever they had around the house, whatever herbs they had, rosemary, bay leaves, or whatever. I think that's what really cacciatore means.
Yeah, I just thought the vinegar, rosemary, garlic, white wine version was so much better. And goes really well with game, right? Because you want something that's, a little acidic to go with a darker meat. And much better than like at restaurants sometimes. Yeah. It's kind of almost a sweet sauce with sweet peppers and tomatoes, and I just don't think it's as good. But anyway, that was just my opinion.
Right. I like it in its natural sauces with vinegar. Now rabbit meat is lean meat, and it's lean meat, and it absorbs in the acidity of the vinegar and whatever, so it gives it a lot of flavor. So we have to get rabbit on the menu more.
Yeah, I rabbit hunt every winter and have a big game dinner, and I absolutely agree. So let's take a few calls.
Welcome to Milk Street. Who's calling?
Hi, my name's Sam.
Hi, Sam. Where are you, Sam?
I'm calling from Spain, although I am a British, Australian, American mongrel.
I hear a little accent there. I was wondering. Well, welcome. What is your question?
I've been making a lot of fresh pasta recently, and anytime you make fresh pasta, you end up using a lot of extra egg yolk. So I have all of this extra egg white left over because I'm using the egg yolk. I've tried a few dessert recipes and things here and there, and I'd love to know a few more recipes and good uses for this egg white. I know I can freeze it, But I guess I'm wondering if there's anything that maybe I haven't thought of outside the typical kind of meringue and, almond Italian desserts. I can't
Go straight on.
Oh, Sam, absolutely. There's so many things you can do with egg whites. If we go to Italians, we make torrone, we make frutti buoni cookies. There's wonderful cookies that are very crunchy with whole hazelnuts in there. And they're so simple. Just egg whites, whipped, a little bit of sugar, and you fold in the toasted hazelnuts, and it's delicious. Meringue cookies, pies, an almond pie. Down in Puglia, you make like a regular crust, and then you make a meringue, and you put toasted almonds in there, just a little bit of flour to give it some body, and you have this meringue pie, which is delicious. So meringue frittata, all egg white frittata by all means with all the vegetables. You can also whip the egg whites and toss them in a stock, like stracciatella. Stracciatella uses the whole egg. But, some people are conscious about it and they like the egg whites. Whipping the egg whites with some spinach, some cheese, grated cheese in a good stock, and you have yourself egg white stracciatella. But, in making dough, the region of Italy that is really the epicenter of dough is Bologna, the city, so Emilia-Romagna. And they make a dough, which is the supposedly supreme of pasta dough, is egg yolks and flour. As much as flour that the egg yolks will take, and that's the whole answer. You don't need anything else in there, and it's very rich. But I like whole eggs. The egg yolks dough, it breaks. Right. You can't very well make a lot of stuffed ravioli, or you cannot roll it out as easy as you can. So using the whole eggs in making pasta is what I would recommend, so you don't have that much of egg whites left. Chris, do you have any addition to that?
I do. It's really obvious, which is angel food cake, but with a twist. I think it was Nancy Silverton who told me this, but she said when she makes angel food cake, she doesn't use an ungreased stew pan. She greases it. And obviously when it bakes, it doesn't climb all the way to the top and holds, it collapses on itself. So you get an angel food cake that's squatter, but has much more interesting texture.
Wow.
So that's something, if you have extra egg whites, you ought to give it a shot.
Sam, I have another idea for egg whites and dessert.
Caution,
you make piles of meringue, like little rounds of meringue on parchment paper, and you bake it just nice and crisp. And then, especially when the fruit is in season, I had it with apricots. So poached apricots and plain whipped cream. And you layer it. You layer the meringue, nice, some whipped cream, some poached apricots, some meringue on top, and the meringue acts like the layer cake in between, and it is delicious.
And marshmallows, I just thought I'd mention. I've got a couple young kids running around, and that would be probably my highest use for egg whites.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for so many ideas. I absolutely love the podcast, and I really appreciate everything, and very excited to try things out and let you guys know how it goes.
Pleasure.
Bye,
Thanks
Sam.
for calling.
Thanks. Bye.
Lydia, I have this thing about egg whites, which is, unless it's savory, I always add some sugar to them because you get a much creamier, more stable foam. Do you always do that?
No, cream of tartar. It's what I usually use if I'm going to make a dessert or something, of course, sugar. But otherwise, I put a little tartar.
I find if you beat egg whites without either lemon juice, cream of tartar, or sugar, they're thin and foamy, and they easily fall apart. Right?
Again, those incorporate the air in it, and they under heat they sort of pop open and it falls down. That's what happens to a cake that falls down. So if you add either the sugar or the little bit of lemon or the cream of tartar, keeps that kind of bubble of air stronger. Sometimes, and you know that, Chris, when you do things, cooking is a lot about common sense and the feel at the moment. So, you feel, okay, the egg whites are at the right moment. I like them like this. I'm going to add them. And you just do it. So, yeah, that works.
Just do it. There you go. I totally agree. You're listening to Milk Street Radio. Special thanks to Lydia for joining me on the phone lines. She'll be back later in the show. Coming up next, how to eat a forest. Hey, Milk Street Radio listeners, we want to hear about your most epic culinary disasters. That's right, I said disasters, because we want to help. Maybe you had an exploding roast or an overflowing cake, a soup that just tasted a bit off. Or maybe you have no idea what you could have possibly done to make a recipe go so wrong. So if you'd like us to answer your question on the show, please email us at questions@milkstreetradio.com, or maybe give us a call at 855-426-9843. That's 855-426-9843. And thanks.
Hello, I'm Ernie Manous. Our show, Hello Houston, is live on the radio on News 88.7 from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. weekdays. But we also give you video access to Hello Houston 24/7.
Yeah, I'm Tessa Barrera. Just head to our YouTube channel for full shows and isolated segments featuring interviews with local and national newsmakers and your favorite lifestyle features from the show.
It's Hello Houston, giving you full access to our show. For more info, check out the Hello Houston page on HoustonPublicMedia.org.
You've helped get our resiliency fund this far, and we're so grateful. We're now less than $98,500 from our $4.4 million goal. And thanks to a matching gift from Laura McWilliams in memory of Bradley McWilliams.
Caution,
Your
please
donation will go
speed.
twice as far today. Go to HoustonPublicMedia.org and click the Resiliency Fund tracker, or you can call 888-909-0887.
This is Milk Street Radio. I'm your host, Christopher Kimball. Right now, it's my conversation with Justin Davies. Justin is a woodworker and a forager who has grown quite a following for turning trees into dessert.
Today I'm tossing some chunks of ponderosa pine bark into a pot with some cream because these trees famously smell a lot like butterscotch, vanilla, or baked goods. And of course, I had to find out, does it taste as good as it smells? No?
On social media, you'll find Justin showing off recipes he makes with trees, as well as the bowls and spoons he carves out of the wood.
This is a pretty piece of ponderosa pine. We got all this nice gray spalting in here.
Justin, welcome to Milk Street.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for having me.
Here's a little quote from you. Not knowing the names of these plants that are native to our own backyard causes this deep sense of loneliness and sadness. I was really struck by that. I spent a lot of time in the woods. I've had a sugaring operation for years. And I always walk through the woods going like, I don't really know these trees too well. But why loneliness and sadness?
It's interesting. This is a term that I borrowed from the great Robin Wall Kimmerer. She writes about this at length in her book Braiding Sweetgrass and in some of her other works. It was one of those mind-blowing experiences for me where I was like, oh yes, that is exactly what I was feeling. I was feeling a deep sense of loneliness. For me, it kind of stemmed in this one particular experience I had where, I'm from Utah. I spent a lot of time in the mountains. And just, probably about 7-8 years ago, I was doing a lot of trail running, and I had this experience where I was out on a training run one day, and I was pushing really hard up this pretty steep climb and came around a switchback and saw this tree that I'd probably seen this specific tree dozens of times, and this species of tree countless times, and I walked up to it and paid attention to it in a way that I hadn't before. I plucked some of its leaves, I kind of patted its trunk and felt the density and heaviness and strength of its wood, and I just couldn't shake that feeling of sadness that I didn't know what this was called. And as Robin Wall Kimmerer writes, we're meant to know the names, we're meant to have an intimate familiarity and relationship with the plants that grow in the places we call home.
Well, in my opinion, humble opinion, even if you're an outdoor enthusiast, you go through nature, right?
Yes.
You don't actually stay in nature. And so I sometimes a red maple and a sugar maple is not quite so clear. So do you find you can actually identify trees pretty accurately, or do you come across trees where you're not quite sure?
Oh, I'm still learning, definitely. I mean, this first experience started a curiosity for trees that began this very long and winding road that led me here. But there are tons of times where I come across something new and I say, I have no idea what this is. And I find that to be really exciting because, again, that's just another step toward curing that feeling of loneliness, right?
Okay, so you get the idea about eating trees.
Yeah.
But why? There's so many things you could taste in nature, right? There's spices, there are things that grow on the ground, there are flowers, there are plants. Why the notion of the flavor of trees, which is at the heart of your project?
Yeah, I think it just captured my imagination. As I was reading about these different species of trees, I was constantly surprised that some of these trees were actually edible. You don't tend to think of trees as a source of flavor or food. For example, reading about spruce trees and spruce tips specifically, and seeing those bright green neon tips that grow out every summer, and had never once thought, hey, are those edible? What do those taste like? And I pluck one off and pop it in my mouth, and I'm really blown away by the flavor of it. I didn't expect a spruce tree to have a bright, lemony, sour flavor. That was not what I would have expected to come out of that.
Okay, so you decide to make ice cream and then the bowls to eat it in and the spoons out of the wood. One of the ones you did was magnolia ice cream, which was one of the more interesting ones. So tell me how you make magnolia ice cream. There were, I guess, 3 parts to what you did.
You know, I generally will pick a tree for that episode and say, okay, I know magnolia flowers are in bloom right now. So first step, cream base. Let's take some magnolia petals, just steep it in some cream. That's pretty straightforward. The trick then becomes, what do I do next? And I like to find ways to incorporate that tree in additional and perhaps unusual ways, like when I did white oak ice cream. I steeped the wood in the cream, and then I gathered some acorns and processed the acorns to make them more palatable, and then candied the acorns and put them in there. With the magnolia, it's a little less apparent. They don't grow an edible fruit or nut. So what I did then was try to think of, well, what might mix into this ice cream really nicely? What might match that kind of gingery botanical flavor of magnolia petals? And fortunately for me, there's a very thriving and prosperous community of foragers online. Alexis Nicole Nelson, the Black Forager on the internet, she's wonderful. Great. She has a recipe where she makes magnolia ginger snap cookies. So I thought, okay, that sounds really nice. A cookie crumble, add the reserved petals from making magnolia syrup, and you know, I think it's going to taste nice, but that's the fun part for me, is tasting it on camera for the first time and seeing what I developed.
Okay, so the worst one you made was this Bradford pear ice cream. You described it as it smelled like fish and trash. So it's such a surprising pivot. So what is a Bradford pear?
If you've never heard of a Bradford pear, you've certainly seen one. These are the preeminent suburban tree in the United States. So they do bloom in these spectacular white blossom, showy white blossoms, but they have an unmistakable odor, and that's what people really associate them with. They smell like different things to different people. I smell kind of a fishy, garbagey smell. A lot of other people, for lack of a better term, smell a boys' dorm room, I guess you could say. But yeah, they have a very unmistakable odor, and they become kind of the pariah of the tree world.
So, since they smell terrible, you thought you should make ice cream out of it as the ultimate challenge, or what?
Yeah. I mean, this is, to be quite honest, I was very confident that was going to taste, at best, like nothing, and at worst, pretty bad. But I knew that because people have such strong opinions about this tree, I knew I had a hit video on my hands. And so, for lack of a better expression, I was doing it for the views.
You know, we talk about steeping magnolia leaves in ice cream or pine needles. But you said you steep wood chips. So does wood actually transmit flavor to cream?
Oh, absolutely. Think of adding like oak chips to a batch of wine or mead. Why not try ice cream? I'm working on a spruce tip ice cream right now, and the mix-in I'm making for it, I'm trying to make spruce bark flavored graham crackers to kind of make a key lime pie inspired ice cream with spruce tips. And I've been making spruce bark syrup, so spruce bark water over heat. And just yesterday I tasted it, and it made my mouth go numb, which was kind of a surprise. And I looked it up, and apparently there are all these volatile compounds that can become extracted. Nothing toxic, but can make your mouth kind of go numb. So now I've got some spruce bark in room temperature water going for a cold infusion. So that's the type of stuff that's been really fun to learn more about. I'm I'm not trying to develop these recipes for mass market appeal or to find the next great thing necessarily. I just personally love sharing the journey of, I'm cutting into this piece of wood. It smells really interesting. I wonder what this might taste like as ice cream.
Well, I think that the bowl you made from the magnolia wood was, forget about the ice cream for a moment. That was extraordinary looking. It just had that wonderful, it's sort of like some maple. You get that, is it spalted? Is that what it is?
Yeah, spalted wood is wood that has some sort of fungal infestation in the wood.
Keep right.
And
then
those different types
right.
of fungus will react to different species of woods in different ways. So a maple is a classic example of this. This magnolia piece did a similar thing where you can get what are called zone lines, where the fungus creates these black lines in the wood. So it's this really fascinating thing. This is kind of what drew me into woodworking to begin with. Very similar to recipe crafting. I think these are two sides of the same coin for me, where I'll grab a piece of wood and I just can't wait to cut it open and see what's inside of there. Nature being the ultimate artist.
Right.
Are you religious, or is nature your religion, or both?
Yeah, this is a great question. I was raised quite religious. I'm from Utah. I was raised Mormon, and then left the Mormon faith probably 12, 13 years ago now. And I definitely think that I felt a deeper connection to nature than I ever did to the religion I was raised in. And that became a real part of my new connection with the universe and my place in it. I found a deep sense of understanding and connection through the interconnectedness of all things in nature.
You walk through the woods now. Do you feel like you have a quote-unquote relationship with the trees, or more of a familiarity with it? Is there something spiritual about this experience for you? I'm not making a joke. It's a serious question.
No. Listen, you're asking my kind of question there. I think absolutely for me. I do feel a deep connection with trees and with nature, and I think the more I've learned, it's just continued to deepen that relationship. And I've had very powerful experiences with specific forests and with specific trees.
What do you mean by those experiences? What powerful experiences?
Yeah, I had one in particular that is just coming to mind right now, where I quit my job in 2021. It was, pandemic times. I was one of those people where I had been working in this career for a while and never felt really fulfilled by it, never really understood what I was doing there. And in a fit of burnout, I quit my job with no real backup plan. I didn't quit my job to make videos about trees and make tree ice cream. That came much later by accident. But I just knew I needed to do something different, something that felt more aligned within myself. And I took a trip down. After quitting my job, I took a camping trip. I loaded my dog into my truck and I drove down into the middle of the desert in central Utah, this area called the San Rafael Swell, and pitched a tent underneath this giant old juniper tree. And I think that ancient old juniper trees, there's a power and magic to these plants. You're sitting there in this extremely desolate place and you don't see water for miles and it feels lifeless, and you look around and here are these giant trees. And I felt this real connection with this one particular old juniper tree that I was just kind of climbing up in and hanging out with, that it was telling me, like, look at me. I'm out here in the middle of this desert, and do I not look like a perfect work of art myself? Like, if you were to pluck me out of the desert and put me in a gallery, would I not be a perfect work of art? But I'm not sitting here concerning myself with whether or not people think I am or am not. I just am. And anyway, this was an experience I had that felt very powerful in that moment and kind of gave me the courage to keep going down this path.
Justin, it's been a great pleasure. I will walk through the woods a different man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Justin Davies. His TikTok account is Just in the Trees. To see photos of Justin's bowls, spoons, and tree-flavored ice creams, please head to milkstreetradio.com. You're listening to Milk Street Radio. Coming up, how to bend time in the kitchen.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Central Market's weekday meals with on-the-go breakfasts, oven-roasted sandwich meats, plus chef-prepared, ready-to-eat sides for dinner. More at centralmarket.com.
Houston Public Media is licensed to the University of Houston System, governed by the UH Board of Regents. Information about open meetings, dates, times, and locations is online at uhsystem.edu.
I'm Jesse Thorne. You want some real, insightful conversations about where art comes from? Well, Bullseye has you covered, as long as you don't mind a little bit of ridiculousness.
Y'all was like really judging me though.
They sniffed it out. They sniffed out that I was weird.
I was like, I don't know where I'm gonna sit, just like in the movies.
Listen, learn, laugh. Bullseye for maximum fun and NPR.
Bullseye, Thursdays at 10 p.m. on News 88.7.
I'm Christopher Kimball, and you're listening to Milk Street Radio. Lydia Bastianich is back on the phone lines, and it's time for us to answer a few more of your cooking questions.
Welcome to Milk Street. Who's calling?
This is Carrick. I'm calling from Gilbert, Arizona.
How can we help you?
So, for many years, I have been trying to get a good, strong sense of basil in my dishes. I've gone to many restaurants and had a great taste of basil in sauces and other dishes. For whatever reason, when I make a sauce at home, I've tried putting it at the beginning, putting it at the end, and I just can't seem to have a very strong taste of basil in my sauce.
Lots of thoughts. First of all, I have the same problem. The basil I buy, when I open the package, I get a faint whiff of basil, you know? I mean, you should get this powerful blast, and my guess is that if you're in Calabria or some other part of Italy, the basil just has a lot more flavor. Secondly, when I was in Calabria a year ago, they just add a couple of 2 or 3 leaves at the very end, and it's not really adding a tremendous amount of flavor to the, say, the sauce. But it's there. It just has a little bit of aroma when you serve it. The other thing I've noticed is basil really needs to be bruised to bring out the flavor. So if you see someone making a pesto in Italy, and Lydia can confirm this probably, you know, it's a mortar and pestle usually, right? Because they're bruising the leaves. And if you throw them in a food processor, it's not really the same. So rolling the leaves, bruising them with your hands to help develop flavor before you cook with them, I think helps. But the big problem is the basil you're getting in the supermarket is just, you know, grossly inferior to the real thing. I mean, Lydia, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's choosing the right basil. Now, you know, there's so many different varietals, from the small, tiny leaves that's very Genovese, that's very much used for the pesto, and it's not found readily here. But, you know, use your senses, use your olfactory. When you're buying basil, put it to your nose. You know, you have a great machine there that will tell you. And then, of course, keeping it fresh in the house, just like flowers, putting it in water. The refrigerator doesn't do justice to basil, it gets it black. And secondly is that, you know, the essence, the flavoring, is captured in oils. And once you introduce it to a hot medium, the oils expand, the aromas flow out. That's why the kitchen smells so good when you're cooking, but a lot of the aromas are floating in the kitchen. So how do you keep that in your food? Use all of the basil. What I do is when I'm ready to cook, I pluck off the leaves and leave them, but I use the stem. I throw it in the sauce, the whole stem. Don't cut it up so you can pluck it out. Also keep in mind, you know, that the stronger the flavors in the sauce, puttanesca has olives, has anchovies, it'll mask more the basil. So if you feature the basil more, you will get more out of it. I think what Chris said, don't trap it, because trapping it, you lose a lot of the oils right on the cutting board. So at the end, when you're ready, rip it right in your sauce, give it a mixture, put the pasta in, save some for the end, for the topping. Mix it quickly, put the cheese, plate it, and whatever. When you're plating it, use the rest of the leaves and just break them on top of it. That's when it really happens, because you have it 3 folds in there.
I really appreciate that tip. I will carry it down.
But the first thing is don't buy lousy basil. Kind of hard to resuscitate basil that never had flavor to start with. So.
Exactly. Carrots. Thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to trying these in my next off.
All right. Have a good time.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
This is Milk Street Radio. If you need a hand in the kitchen, we're always here. Give us a call, 855-426-9843. That's 855-426-9843, or just email us at questions@milkstreetradio.com. Welcome to Milk Street. Who's calling?
Hi, Chris. My name is Joan. I live in Greenwich, Connecticut.
How can we help you?
I've always been interested in making gnocchi. I hope I'm saying it correctly, even though I'm Italian. I wanted to know how to make light, fluffy ones versus the heavy lead sinkers that make you feel like you can't move after you've eaten them. I know that the prepackaged ones are made with potato flakes, where the homemade ones are made with fresh potatoes. I would like to know what the secret is to making great gnocchi, which potatoes are the best ones to use, and how involved the process actually is.
I've made it 3 different ways with potato from scratch. It's not hard to do. You cook like a russet, not a waxy potato, and you just add enough flour and you mix it up, etc. The other way was with potato flakes, which is sort of a cheater's gnocchi. We've done that in Milk Street. I don't think it's as good as the real deal, but in a pinch you can do that. But the one that really intrigued me was in Calabria, where they made a hot water gnocchi, which is flour and hot water. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's not going to be as light and fluffy as the others, but that was just another technique I'd never heard of. But let me turn this over to Lydia, who probably has a better answer.
I was waiting for Chris's responses. Yeah,
I'm sure you were.
You were pretty close, Chris.
Thank you.
Gnocchi, I use whole potatoes, flakes, and whatever else you guys want to use. It's okay, but I use potatoes. Russet, starchy potatoes, absolutely. I boil it in their skin, plenty of water. I test it with a fork when it goes through. You can do it in the microwave if you want, but I like the skin on. And then I let it cool a little bit, and I peel it. I let it cool again, and that's when I rice it. But I rice it still warm.
Keep flat.
And I rice it right on the granite tap or the marble or whatever. Wooden is fine too. But I find that the granite cools off the potatoes quicker. So I spread them out. I take a fork. I don't want to sort of press it down. I want it to remain fluffy. And I spread them out. A little bit of salt, still warm, so it takes in the salt. And I let it cool completely.
Wow.
The secret is right there. You let it cool because a lot of the water evaporates. If you don't let it all evaporate, if you don't let it cool, it will require more flour. The more flour you add, the more you need, the tougher the gnocchi come. So, as little flour as you can to bring it all together. You know, I put an egg, I whisk an egg, and you can put some grated cheese, and you can put whatever, little spices in there, nutmeg if you like. But simple gnocchi, straightforward. You whisk 2 eggs. When it's cool, I sort of drizzle the eggs all over, and then I take the flour and I sprinkle the flour and begin with a dough scraper to sort of pull it up and mix it. The least kneading that you do and the least flour to hold together as a dough. And it will stick a little bit in your hands, and that's okay. You kind of put some more flour and you rub it off. As you go along, you will incorporate more flour.
Probably better less than more because you can always add.
Exactly. It is also important that you have abundant water, more than regular pasta because it is very floury, and because the water temperature will go down and then the gnocchi will settle on the bottom, become mush. You want the boiling of the water to continue as you're cooking the gnocchi, so even cook it in 2 batches. You fish it out with a spider, and then you put a little sauce, and then you continue the next. The secret of good gnocchi is not too much flour, don't knead it too much, and you make sure that the water, when you're putting to cook, there's enough water so it retains its boiling point, or at least comes back very quickly to its boiling point.
It sounds like, Joan, you just got a complete cooking class in gnocchi. I just want to say it.
I'd rather go to Lydia's house and eat it.
Yeah, well, good point.
So you feel confident now? You're going to get in there and make good gnocchis? No.
I'll give it a try. I think it's a cultivated art.
You have to try it. It's okay if it doesn't happen the first time. But just think about Lydia being behind you and telling you these things. And you do it. You do it once, you do it twice. You'll get it. I know you will.
Okay, I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep left.
This is Milk Street Radio. Special thanks to Lydia Bastianich. You can learn more about her TV shows, cookbooks, and line of pasta sauces at lydiasitaly.com. Now it's time for my conversation with author Jenny Linford on the importance of time in cooking. Jenny, welcome to Milk Street.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
You say, you're talking about the role of time in food flavor. You say time's relationship with food is multifaceted and complex, extending far beyond the right cooking times for dishes. So, just in a nutshell, what does that cover?
A lot. I mean, I think if you think about... yes, it's a big subject. So if you think about time as the universal, invisible ingredient in the food that we grow, make, and cook, it just gives you a sense of actually how huge time is. When I first started thinking about time, I did start thinking about it from the point of view of cooking times. But the more time I spent thinking about time, I realized it just goes way beyond that, because you have the time that's gone into, let's say, the growing of a crop. You have the time it takes, a fruit to ripen. You have the time it takes to rear livestock. But we also fight the effects of time, because time destroys foods. As human beings, we preserve foods in order to make it last against the deteriorating effects of time. So it's very multifaceted, I would say.
Well, it almost seems like our cultures have two opposing views: old and slow, young and fast, right? And so you have the world of social media, which is infinitely fast, and then you have the world of Iberico hams and slow food and other things. But sometimes grilling, which is quick, is just as good as barbecuing, which is slow. So I guess my question is fast always a problem? Or is it a case-by-case situation?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, what I was trying to say to people is it's like the right amount of time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's something to think about when you're with food. So I looked at that question of, the cachet that time has, that we automatically think, an older Parmesan is getting better than a younger one. But the Parmesan import I spoke to, he was like, no, I don't want it to be too old, but I want that milky sweetness, from when it's a bit younger. And equally, the whiskey guy is an amazing, very dynamic whiskey man, and he was just like, it's up to people what they like. You might really enjoy drinking a younger one, So it's quite interesting. There was a lot of flexibility, actually, and I think that's what I just wanted people to perhaps to think about time.
So let's talk about hanging meat. You read the old books, and they go on a pheasant hunt or something, and they hang it for 3 or 4 days until it falls off the string or whatever, and then it gets moldy, and you have to trim off the mold. But as you point out, that actually has a lot of massive benefits for flavor.
Right.
And texture.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because hanging meats is a big part historically in Britain. I mean, it's particularly for beef. And it is, you taste the difference. If you eat a piece of supermarket steak that's sort of bright red and bloody, it's got that really metallic taste of blood, actually. And then if you eat, a piece of beef from the carcass that's been hung, it won't have that really immediate irony flavour. It'll have much more complex savouriness to it, and a nicer texture, and just be a more rewarding experience. And a more expensive experience with that, because time is money, and so the hanging of meat takes time. The carcass shrinks, because it's done in quite a cool, dry atmosphere, and there'll be a loss because they'll have to trim off the bits from the edge, where it's got too mouldy or whatever. But the meat will be tender and filled with flavour, and that is quite exciting.
So obviously, starting late 19th century, women were spending 9 hours a day in the kitchen.
Go straight
just cleaning a coal stove every morning was a horrific job. And going back to the 1880s, there was large movements for communal kitchens or anything to get out of the drudgery of all those hours. And that's why convenience foods starting in 1900 were immediately accepted. But obviously there's been a reaction to that with slow food and other things. Do you think that there is a real anti-fast movement, a real slow movement in the way people actually make decisions about how they want to live, or is that pretty much all talk?
I think it's a mixture.
It's all over now.
I find I meet young people who enjoy the making of food. There's a sort of pleasure in this idea of making something for real and putting in the time. So I think there is a sense that people crave that connection, that sort of reality, which food, of course, is very real, and we eat it, becomes part of us. There's sort of viscerality, I suppose, to food. But I think, the overall trends are against slow because we live in a world, as you said, such a speeded up world. The takeaway culture of having food delivered to your door. So my son and his girlfriend, they love having takeaways delivered. That, for me, was never something that I would have particularly wanted to do if I would have wanted to go out for a meal, if anything.
Right, and by the way, takeaway food, I just have to say it. It never tastes good.
Quite, I agree.
I've never had good takeout.
I concur with you. I'm like, why? So, and you're